She once told me not to propose because her friends would laugh at the cheap ring I could afford. So I didn't. A year later, I proposed to someone else with a $12,000 ring at the same restaurant, as she watched from 2 tables away. My name is Robert. I am 32 and I work as a structural engineer in Toronto. Most of my workdays are a mix of office design reviews and visiting construction sites around the city. It is a steady job that pays well, but it is not the kind of career that looks flashy on social media. I live in a small condo near the waterfront, and my routine is pretty predictable. Early mornings, long workdays, gym 3 evenings a week, and quiet weekends unless a project deadline is coming up. About 3 years ago, I started dating Linda. She was 29 and worked as a real estate agent for a mid-sized brokerage downtown. We were together a little over 2 years when the situation that led to this story really started. We never officially moved in together, but Linda stayed at my place most weekends and had a drawer in my bedroom where she kept some clothes and makeup. Linda cared a lot about appearances and social circles. She was always going out with other agents or friends who worked in sales, marketing, or influencer-type jobs. A lot of expensive restaurants, rooftop bars, and group vacations that were documented heavily online. At first, I assumed it was just a lifestyle difference. Engineers are usually quieter people. I make good money, but I tend to save it, invest it carefully, and think about purchases before making them. Linda noticed that difference early on. The first year of our relationship was mostly smooth. We took a short trip to Montreal, spent Christmas with my family, and things seemed stable enough that I started thinking seriously about proposing. I am not impulsive with big decisions. When I think about something like marriage, I run through logistics first. Finances, timing, long-term compatibility. Near the end of our second year together, I quietly started looking at engagement rings. Nothing extreme, just something simple and solid that made sense financially. One night after dinner, I casually mentioned that I had started researching rings. That conversation ended up being the moment I first realized Linda and I might see the future very differently. It happened at a restaurant near King Street while we were waiting for 2 of her friends to arrive. And the way Linda reacted to the idea of a proposal caught me completely off guard. The comment from Linda did not come out of nowhere. It started as a normal conversation until it very quickly was not. We had just finished dinner and were waiting for 2 of her friends to arrive. The place was one of those trendy restaurants where the lighting is dim and everyone seems to be taking pictures of their drinks. I mentioned that I had started looking at engagement rings. I did not present it as a big announcement. It was more like mentioning that I had been researching options and wanted to make sure I chose something that made sense financially. Linda did not look excited. She looked amused. Not the good kind. She leaned back in her chair and asked what kind of ring I was thinking about. So I told her the truth. I said I had been looking at rings in the $5,000 to $6,000 range. Something classic. A decent diamond, but nothing ridiculous. I expected a conversation about style or shape. Instead, she laughed. Not loudly, but enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. Then she said something that I still remember word for word. She told me I should not propose if that was the kind of ring I planned to bring. At first, I thought she was joking, but she kept going. She said her friends would absolutely destroy her if she showed up to brunch with a ring that cheap. She said everyone in her circle had rings that were at least $10,000 or more. Then she added something that honestly stuck with me for a long time. She said if I proposed with a budget ring, it would be embarrassing for both of us. She said it casually like she was explaining something obvious. I remember just sitting there for a moment trying to decide if she understood how that sounded. So I asked her directly if she was serious. Linda shrugged and said she was just being honest. She told me she would rather wait until I could afford something better than rush into a proposal that looked cheap. Then her friends arrived and the conversation ended right there. But the damage was already done. That was the first time I seriously questioned whether Linda and I valued the same things. I did not respond to Linda right away after she said that. Her friends arrived about a minute later, and the conversation shifted to completely different topics. Drinks, weekend plans, some office gossip from her real estate brokerage. Linda acted like nothing unusual had just happened. I stayed quiet for most of the night. Not because I was shocked. It was more like something in my head had already clicked into place, and I was just letting the evening finish. When dinner ended, we all walked outside together. Her friends called an Uber, and Linda stood with them on the sidewalk laughing about some party they were planning the following weekend. Before she got in the car, she hugged me and said she would text me when she got home. Her tone was completely normal, like the conversation about the ring had not meant anything at all. I watched the car drive away and then walked back to my own car. The drive home was about 15 minutes, and I spent most of it thinking about one simple question. If someone is worried that their friends will laugh at the ring you give them, what exactly are you building a marriage on? By the time I pulled into the parking garage under my building, the answer was already clear. When I got upstairs, I did not sit down or turn on the TV. Instead, I went straight to the bedroom and opened the drawer Linda used when she stayed over. Inside were a few shirts, a pair of leggings, and some random things she had gradually left there over time. I grabbed a storage box from the closet and started packing. The clothes from the drawer, her extra shoes by the door, the makeup bag she kept in my bathroom, a few small things she had left in the kitchen. It took maybe 20 minutes. When I finished, there were 2 neat boxes sitting by the front door of my condo. I stood there looking at them for a minute and realized something strange. I did not feel angry. Mostly I felt relieved that she had said what she said before I bought a ring. Linda texted me about 40 minutes later. She sent a normal message asking if I had made it home safely. I replied yes. Then I asked her if she could stop by my place the next evening because I had something of hers she needed to pick up. She replied with a confused emoji and asked what I meant. I told her it was just a few things she had left at my condo. She did not respond for about 10 minutes. Then she asked why I suddenly sounded so formal. I did not get into a long explanation over text. I just said that after our conversation at the restaurant, I had done some thinking, and it made more sense for us to go in different directions. Her reply came almost immediately. She said I was being dramatic and that I had completely misunderstood what she meant. According to her, she had only been joking about the ring. That explanation did not really line up with how the conversation actually happened, but I did not argue about it. Instead, I repeated that her things were packed and waiting by the door whenever she wanted to pick them up. The next message was noticeably less calm. She asked if I was seriously breaking up with her over a comment about a ring. I told her no. I was ending the relationship because the comment explained how she viewed things that mattered to me. There was another long pause after that. Then she sent a message saying she would come by the next evening. The following night, she arrived exactly when she said she would. When I opened the door, she immediately looked past me and noticed the 2 boxes sitting near the entrance. Her expression changed right away. Linda stepped inside and asked if I was seriously doing this. I told her yes. She walked over to the boxes and opened one of them, pulling out a shirt like she expected it to disappear if she did not grab it quickly. Then she started talking. At first it was annoyance. Then it shifted into something closer to anger. According to Linda, I was massively overreacting to a casual comment. But the interesting part was that even while she was arguing with me, she never actually took back what she said about the ring. She just kept insisting I should not have taken it so seriously. The conversation lasted maybe 15 minutes. Linda stood near the door with one of the boxes open, pulling things out while talking at the same time. Her tone kept bouncing between irritated and dismissive. She kept saying the same thing in slightly different ways. That I was taking a harmless comment way too seriously. That everyone jokes about engagement rings. That I was acting insecure. I listened, but I did not interrupt her. Eventually, she stopped and looked at me like she was waiting for me to admit she was right. So I explained it as simply as I could. I told her the ring itself was not the issue. The issue was that the first thing she thought about when I mentioned proposing was whether her friends would laugh at the price. I told her that if the social reaction mattered more than the relationship itself, then we were probably building 2 completely different futures. Linda rolled her eyes when I said that. She told me I was twisting her words to make her look shallow. Then she said something that honestly confirmed my decision. She said that appearances do matter and pretending they do not is just naive. According to her, people judge everything. The car you drive, the watch you wear, the ring you give someone. And if you do not understand that, you are setting yourself up to look stupid. I remember standing there thinking that she had just perfectly summarized the difference between us. For me, the proposal was supposed to mean something personal. For her, it sounded like a public performance. After that, the conversation basically ended. She packed the rest of her things into the boxes, carried them into the hallway, and called an Uber. Before she left, she turned around and told me I would regret throwing away a good relationship over something this small. Then the elevator doors closed, and she was gone. I stood in the hallway for a moment, went back inside my condo, and locked the door. Then I opened my phone and blocked her number. After that, I blocked her on every social media account we followed each other on. Not out of anger. Mostly because I did not see a reason to keep a line open for arguments that would not change anything. And just like that, Linda disappeared from my daily life. For the next year, I did not hear a single word from her, which honestly made moving forward a lot easier. Life got noticeably quieter after that. Not in a dramatic way, just simpler. Linda had a very loud social schedule, and when she disappeared from my routine, a lot of small things disappeared with her. The constant plans, the expensive restaurants, the weekend events that felt more like networking than relaxing. For a few weeks, I mostly focused on work. Engineering projects have a way of filling your schedule, whether you want them to or not. That spring, our firm started a large mid-rise development, and I spent a lot of time going back and forth between the office and the site. The upside of that kind of workload is that it keeps your brain busy. I did not spend much time thinking about Linda after the breakup. Blocking her had been a deliberate choice because I did not want the usual cycle where someone tries to reopen the conversation 3 months later. No late-night texts. No social media curiosity. Just a clean break. By the time summer rolled around, the relationship honestly felt like something that had happened years earlier instead of a few months. Then something unexpected happened. I met someone new. Her name was Emily, and she was 30. We met in a very ordinary way. One evening after work, I stopped at a small cafe near my building that I had started using as a quiet place to read or answer emails. Emily was sitting at the table next to mine working on a laptop, and we ended up talking after both of us reached for the same power outlet. She worked as a pediatric nurse at a hospital a few subway stops away. Our conversation was simple. Work schedules, city life, the usual first meeting topics. But one thing stood out immediately. Emily was calm, not performative, not trying to impress anyone, just straightforward and easy to talk to. We exchanged numbers before leaving the cafe that night. And over the next few weeks, we started seeing each other regularly. Dinner after her hospital shifts. Walks along the waterfront. Nothing dramatic. Just a steady rhythm that felt surprisingly comfortable. Over the next few months, Emily and I kept seeing each other. What I noticed first was how normal everything felt. There was no constant pressure to perform some kind of lifestyle for other people. Most of our time together was simple things that actually felt relaxing. Emily worked long hospital shifts, usually 12 hours, so our schedules had to be flexible. Some weeks we would meet for breakfast after her night shift. Other weeks we would grab dinner late because she finished work at 9. But the rhythm worked. About 3 months in, we had our first real conversation about past relationships. Not in a dramatic way. It came up naturally while we were walking along the waterfront one evening. She asked why my previous relationship ended. So I told her the short version. I explained that my ex cared a lot about appearances and that the conversation about engagement rings had made it clear we had different priorities. Emily listened without interrupting. Then she laughed quietly and said something that stuck with me. She said, if someone proposes to you and your first thought is the price of the ring, you are probably missing the point. That was it. No speech. No judgment. Just a simple observation. Moments like that kept happening over the next several months. Emily did not treat relationships like a status symbol. She treated them like something private between two people. By the time we had been dating about 8 months, I realized something important. For the first time since the breakup with Linda, the idea of proposing did not feel complicated anymore. It felt obvious. So I started quietly looking at engagement rings again. This time the budget was different. Over the past year, I had received a promotion at work and finished paying off my car loan. My finances were in a much stronger position than they had been before. After a few weeks of looking around, I found a ring I really liked. It was simple but elegant, and it cost just under $12,000. But the funny part is that the price was not what mattered. What mattered was that I had finally met someone I actually wanted to give it to. So I made a reservation at a restaurant downtown for the following Friday night. And completely by coincidence, it happened to be the exact same restaurant where Linda had laughed at the idea of my proposal a year earlier. I did not choose the restaurant because of Linda. That part was honestly a coincidence. It is a popular place near King Street, and it happened to have an open reservation that worked with Emily's schedule. She had finished a long hospital shift that afternoon and wanted something quiet where we could sit and talk for a while. When we walked in, the place looked almost exactly the same as it had a year earlier. Same lighting, same layout, even the same host stand near the entrance. Emily did not know any of that history, of course. To her, it was just another dinner in the city. We sat down at a table near the middle of the room and ordered drinks. The plan was simple. We would eat, talk, and at some point during the evening, I would ask the question. I had the ring in my jacket pocket the entire time. Dinner went smoothly. Emily told me about a difficult shift she had worked earlier in the week, and I told her about a structural issue we had solved on one of our projects. About halfway through the meal, I excused myself to use the restroom. Mostly, I just needed a moment to breathe and make sure the ring box was actually still in my pocket. When I came back to the table, something strange happened. Emily was not looking at me. She was looking past me toward the entrance of the restaurant. Her expression looked slightly confused. I turned around to see what she was looking at. And that was the moment I saw someone I had not expected to ever run into again. 2 tables behind us, sitting with 3 other people, was Linda. It took maybe 2 seconds for recognition to register on both sides. Her eyes locked on me almost immediately. Then she noticed Emily sitting across from me. And finally, she noticed the small ring box in my hand that I had just taken out of my jacket pocket as I sat down. The timing could not have been stranger if someone had planned it. For a moment, the entire situation just froze. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Linda was staring directly at the ring box in my hand. Her friends were talking among themselves and clearly had no idea what was happening. But Linda was completely focused on our table. Her expression shifted from confusion to something much harder to read. Emily noticed the tension immediately. She leaned slightly forward and asked if everything was okay. I told her yes, because honestly it was. The strange part was that seeing Linda there did not create the reaction most people would expect. There was no anger or awkward panic. If anything, it felt like watching a scene from an old chapter of my life that no longer had any real connection to me. Linda kept looking in our direction. Then her eyes moved from me to Emily and back again. She had clearly noticed the ring box. Emily followed my glance over my shoulder and quietly asked if I knew someone behind us. So I told her the truth. I said that the woman 2 tables back was someone I used to date about a year ago. Emily nodded once. That was the entire reaction. No drama, no interrogation, just acceptance of a simple fact. Meanwhile, Linda had stopped talking to the people at her table completely. One of her friends said something to her, but she barely reacted. Her attention stayed locked on us. At that point, I realized something ironic. A year earlier, Linda had told me not to propose because the ring I could afford would embarrass her in front of her friends. Now she was sitting 20 feet away watching me do exactly that with someone else. And the ring sitting in my hand was worth about $12,000. But the price was not the point. I turned back toward Emily. She was still looking at me with a calm expression, completely unaware of the weird, full-circle moment happening behind her. So I opened the small box. Then I stood up next to the table and asked the question I had planned to ask all evening. The restaurant got very quiet around our table when I stood up. Not completely silent, but quiet enough that a few nearby tables noticed something was happening. Emily looked up at me with a confused smile at first because she clearly was not expecting it right at that moment. I opened the ring box and the diamond caught the light from the overhead lamps. Then I said the only thing that actually mattered that night. I told her that the last year of my life had been calmer, happier, and more honest than the years before it. I told her that every ordinary day with her felt easier than the best days in my past relationship. Then I asked if she would marry me. Emily covered her mouth for a second and laughed in that surprised way people do when something good catches them off guard. She nodded almost immediately. Then she said yes. The nearby tables started clapping quietly, and a couple at the next table congratulated us as I slid the ring onto her finger. Emily stood up and hugged me, and for a moment the entire restaurant faded into the background. But when we sat back down, I did glance across the room once more. Linda was still sitting at her table. Except now she was not looking confident or amused like she had been the last time we were in that restaurant together. She was staring directly at the ring on Emily's hand. And judging by the expression on her face, she had clearly figured out what it probably cost. One of her friends leaned over and asked her something, but Linda barely responded. I did not say anything to her. I did not walk over. There was nothing left to discuss. About 10 minutes later, her group paid their bill and left the restaurant. Linda did not look in our direction again while walking out. Emily never even realized the strange full-circle moment that had happened that night. And honestly, I did not feel the need to explain it. A year earlier, someone had told me not to propose because the ring I could afford would embarrass her. That turned out to be useful information, because it made it very easy to recognize when I had finally met the right person to give one to instead.